after I reviewed my notes in the last video, I thought maybe I should go ahead and talk a little bit about the parts list, just to head it off before it becomes a problem with you. So here's the one that I created when I first set this assignment up a few years ago. Some words on the presentation file when you do your exploded ISO. Pull the things apart in a logical order in how they would be assembled. If you've ever looked at parts catalogs, or like the owner manual that you get with a piece of equipment that you may buy of some kind, often it'll have a parts list and an exploded diagram. Okay, and so it goes together logically. So you can pull your parts, you can pull your assembly apart in order, groups at a time, get them lined up, so that it looks good. It looks, logical. Okay. You could use this example. You could use the one in the video that I showed you of Christians. Either one works good. Okay, so the parts list, we've got an issue with. I use two sub-assemblies, one of the ball bearing, and then one of the entire wheel assembly. And when you bring it into a parts list, you got to work with it a little bit differently. So I'm gonna just start through and setting one up here for you. So I'm gonna bring in my IPN file, and I'm gonna change the view over. This is the orientation that I had, and I'm gonna set the scale to 1/4. That seems to work good for my file. And on display options, turn on thread. Oh, I got an email. And turn on tangent edges. And of course, we want to keep it as a hidden line, unshaded. Okay. And here we go. Okay. And so that places it. Now the parts list. There's two different options when you go to create the parts list. So select my view. Okay. So structured is what we normally would use. Parts only will list every single part. Okay. And sometimes you want to do that if you don't have, well, you can do it with sub-assemblies, and that would be okay. Our issue is the ball bearing in this project. We're going to purchase that ball bearing already assembled. So we only need one part number for that ball bearing. We don't need 3 part numbers for it. Now, if we were manufacturing the ball bearings also, we could do parts only, and it would list everything individually. And I'll go ahead and show you what I'm talking about with that. So yes, okay. And so you can see right here, I've got the bearing outer ring, bearing inner ring, and the ball bearing. It lists them out all as individual parts. Okay, that's not what I want, because I'm going to purchase this ball bearing already made. Everything else, yeah, would be what I would want. Okay, so I'm going to go back, and let's try and do that again. I'm going to stick with structured. And I placed it up high because we're going to make some changes to it here. So we bring it in, and you notice it has all the things that were a subassembly listed together. So I'm going to go ahead and put some balloons in, and I'm just going to drop them in quickly, not trying to line them up or anything like that, which you're obviously going to line them up. Okay, so you notice everything in the subassembly is considered part 6. And we look into here, it just has a part number 1353-1. No description or anything like that. So what we want to do is we want to edit our parts list, and let's go ahead and add our material column. Okay, and you notice right here, part number 6, that was my subassembly of the wheel. So I expand the plus sign, and it lists out all of the individual parts. Here is the ball bearing right here, and there's a plus, and if I expand it, then it pulls in all the individual pieces of the ball bearing. That's not what I want. I want to keep it as a subassembly. So I keep it condensed. Okay. And so we'll apply that. And so you can see now it used a number, 6.1, 0.2, 0.3, like that. And so we look up here. Okay. So a lot of times if you've looked in parts catalogs, it'll have each individual item listed, and then there might be a I don't know, a circle or a polyline drawn around all of this, and we could purchase all of this as one group of parts, if you will. Okay, say for example, you could order all the individual pieces to a carburetor, or you could order the entire carburetor assembly. That's kind of the same thing that we got going on here. Okay, so once you get that in, get your balloons set up. Let me go back to my original drawing here. Your balloons need to be in order. They need to be neat, okay, and orderly. You can renumber your items if you want to. I'm not so much hung up on renumbering them so that they're all in part order. The numbers seem to make more sense as they go around the circle. Sometimes it just different companies do it differently. One thing you notice I did not balloon every single item. Okay, because it's quite obvious that this stuff is the same as this stuff. Okay, so anytime that it's obvious that something is identical, there's no need to balloon every item. You can, however, add an additional leader to it if it makes you feel better. Okay, you can certainly do that if the items are close to each other. Okay, so let's talk about the trails. Oftentimes I will draw my own trails if I don't like how the assembly looks, because sometimes if you pull out items individually one at a time, you'll get multiple trails. And the way that I typically do presentation files is I'll decide what's going to be my base that's not going to move. In this particular case, I used part number 1. And then I selected everything over here and moved it out the distance to here. Okay. And then I selected everything in the wheel assembly and moved it up and over to this point. And then I would grab the remaining stuff and move it back to this point. And so on like that. And did the same thing down here. I would grab all of these items, move them at one time back this distance, and then move back and do the same thing over again. It cuts down on the number of trails that you've got. And then sometimes if it just looks wonky, I will turn off the trails and just draw my own with a sketch. Okay. You have to project geometry, but you can draw from center of circles back to intersections and things like that. So it's whatever looks great. All right, so now the parts list. We used materials in creating our parts, okay? But HRS and CRS is not listed in our inventor materials. So as long as you use a steel of some kind so that it looks correct, okay, that's okay with me. But here in our parts list, just click in the cell, double click in there, and then edit that to be what the book has it listed as. Okay. Same way on description. If you didn't get a description put in, enter that in here, especially if it's a fastener, because the fastener would be described by what it is and what size it is. Okay. And you do that and okay it. Okay. Adjust your column widths. Try to keep everything in a single line. Okay. It looks neater when that's done that way. And so you'll adjust your column widths and then adjust the height of the column so that it's either pegged down against the title block, or depending upon the orientation of your view, you could peg it up in the top corner. Okay. Do put a note in about where you got your fasteners. When I did this project, I got them from McMaster Carr and from Fastenal, and I think some of them came from the Content Center. So you'll need to put a note as to where your fasteners came from. And I think that that pretty well covers, a lot of everything. Yes, I know for some reason the threads are not showing up on the bolts here that I brought in. I think it's because I think I got those from, I got them from Fastenal. So it has to do with their particular model that I brought in. Okay, so if you got questions on that, send me an email, catch me on WebEx, and come into the lab, and we'll help you get straightened out with it, okay?